Thank you for joining the third annual Spring Financial Aid webinar series. This series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, or NCCPC for short. NCCPC is a collective impact coalition with over 40 members serving over 150,000 students across 12 Northern California counties. Our geographic footprint includes the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare counties. We bring over 200 leaders together through committees, convenings, and working groups around 4 key pillars. Number 1, advancing public policy. Number 2, building campus partnerships. Number 3, scaling workforce pipelines. And number 4, convening communities of practice. Our members are locally and nationally recognized college access and success programs, advocacy organizations, college and neighborhood promise programs, K-12 and charter school districts, education technology nonprofits, individual advocates, and cities and mayors. We believe that working together, we can impact systemic change on behalf of all of the students we serve and beyond.
And now I'm excited to introduce today's session, Supporting Students Navigating College Enrollment Decisions, with Hannah Smith, Vice President of Partnerships at Moneythink, John Tamrat, Partner Success Manager at Moneythink, and Tiffany Green, Founder and CEO of Uprooted Academy.
Thank you so much, Beth. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining. We're psyched to be here with you this morning and really grateful to the NCCPC crew for having us today. This is such a great series of webinars, and I hope you can check out ours and all of the other great opportunities out there as well. So Beth already sort of gave an overview of who we are. We also have our colleague, Dinara Saitova, who's on the call. She'll be kind of answering questions in chat and supporting as well. So today, we're going to go through just kind of a quick overview of who we are, these two organizations. We'll talk a little bit about the college affordability problem, which I know that many in this proverbial room probably know very well. And then we'll talk a little bit about Decided, which is the free tool that you can use to support some of these financial literacy and affordability questions with the young people in your life that you're supporting. So we'll talk about the student side and then also the advisor dashboard, which is the side that you can use to sort of track your students and support them. We'll also go through a couple of student scenarios. So Tiffany Green, who's with us here today, our sort of partner spotlight, is going to talk through a couple of real live student situations, and we'll kind of contextualize how this tool and how some of the resources we'll talk about today could support your students. And then, of course, as Mary mentioned, we'll have a really thorough time for Q&A as well. You can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to hand it off to Tiffany. I'm just going to allow, we want to just give a quick overview of our two organizations. So Tiffany, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or yes, still in the morning. And my name is Tiffany, as mentioned before. I'm the CEO and founder of Uprooted Academy. And so I would love to share this resource with you all, so that way you all know how you can use it with your students. And as mentioned before, I'm going to be contextualizing some of the other components around maybe the social emotional side of this work, as we think about also the practical side and how using both of those frameworks together, and we can really get our students to make really good financial choices. So who are we? We are a fairly new organization. We're about 3 years old. We are in about 20 states. So we support school districts. So we are here in LA, but we also support community-based organizations such as Ear Up, Talent Search, Upward Bound, anyone that's working with students around the college application process. And we have one goal, right? We just want to make sure that we can democratize the college application process, so that way students can have the resources that they need, so that way they can navigate the process. So we know oftentimes there's so many resources to help students find a school, right? Create a list, know where they want to go. But ultimately, when it's time for them to go inside their application, that's really where they get stuck. And so we hope to fill that gap. And so on the next slide, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about our resource. So we have a free platform. It can be used on the web or on a phone app. So we do have an app on the Apple and the Google Play Store, and we have on-demand content. So if you think about Netflix, how it has episodes, that's essentially what we have. So we have really short episodes for different topics for students to have the fullness of what they need to apply to college. And so what we like to do is we like to mirror like a college application boot camp that many wealthy students are privileged to go to. But this particular support is on demand. So students can start it, they can stop it, they can rewind it, they can slow it down. And so in this platform, students will learn everything around college application 101, how to find a major, financial aid 101, percentage of need met. We break down each topic in a way that facilitates understanding. So going above and beyond that surface level content and really giving them the resources and tools and language they need. We also have other components like a virtual college visit that we put on. So we do around 60 or 70 of those per year. So once your students are in our platform, they will get invites and understand all of the ways that they can engage with us. So what is it like? So ultimately students go in, like I mentioned before, similar to Netflix, they might like scroll and say, okay, I need support with, picking a major or how to do that. And once they're in the app, they can choose their lesson, they can play it. And we actually have a lot of support. So the students can get push notifications. There's reminders that are set up in our app. If they're just using our web-based platform, that's okay too. They'll get email reminders as well. So that way they can continue their journey. And this is really great, especially because when we serve students, I worked with students in high school for over a decade. We know that there's different timelines, right? So some of our students are really ambitious if they're doing EA or ED. So they want to start this content earlier. But for our late bloomers, right, they can have an entry point as well. And so the students can get exactly what they need. And after each lesson, the students will get basically a chapter full of resources. So there's activities. The activities are fillable. They can type it in their laptop, or if they have a tablet with one of those cool pencils. In each lesson, there's helpful links, as well as action steps. So the video-based content at the end of every lesson, they get action steps. Again, we tell them some of them will apply to them and some of them might not. But everything that they need for those chapters are in the app or in the web-based platform. And then, as mentioned before, once students join our network, they'll be invited to our virtual college visit. So if you are hoping that students have more options and more, awareness of different universities, we do that. And we think about schools across the board, from our HBCUs to our state institutions, especially in California because of our partnership with LA. But even some of the private schools that have a high percentage of need met, we do try to target those schools that have really good financial aid to be in front of our students to expand their mind, and so that way they can be aware of their options. And if you want to get started, you'll see a resource at the end of this that you can download, but you can use it as well, right? So if you need resources or language or want to play the videos for your students, all you have to do is download our app. Again, we're in the Apple and Google Play Store, or you can just visit our web-based platform and join at uprootedacademy.org. We tell students to enable the notifications, set reminders to learn and attend events, and then guess what? They can start learning. So we just wanted to let you know about this particular resource. Like I said, it's fairly new, so if you don't know, it's not like you missed it. We've just been growing, and so really thankful to have this opportunity. It's really great resources. Our students, just a data point, our students in the class of 2022 on average spent 90 hours in our app. And what that told us, it was that students really wanted this information and they used it and they grappled with it and they rewatched it. And then the most popular hour in our platform is actually 11 p.m. So it's great for us because we get to go to sleep and students feel like they have agency when it's time for them to learn. And so thank you folks so much for letting me kind of share that resource. We do have partnerships available if your students need like essay writing workshops or just like financial aid workshops, and you could reach out to us at uprootedacademy.org. But I'll be chiming in a little bit later, but just wanted to share those resources as a complement because we do break down a lot of financial aid stuff and talk about scholarships, and you have access for your students.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Yeah, so we've been psyched to partner with Uprooted to provide some support. And in many ways, it's a really nice pairing because Tiffany's platform does a really great comprehensive view of the college application process from start to finish, really. And we've been sort of collaborating on some of the financial literacy and affordability pieces. So Tiffany's a counselor at heart. We share that and really come to this work wanting to make this somewhat easier and more manageable given the high caseloads that y'all are working with, and given how complicated and sort of layered some of these topics are. So I'm just going to quickly share a little bit about who we are. So we are a nonprofit that's really focused on sort of harnessing the power of people and technology to bring some transparency to college costs. So that people are really, equipped to invest in their futures and be smart about these college making decisions that young people are up against at a pretty young age, right? So to be 17 or 18 and making some of these decisions with so much on the table, we want to make sure that we can bring some transparency and some simplicity to a really complicated process. So we do this by really building some of these free tech tools like Decided to support students and advisors that essentially brings transparency. So I wanted to actually just start hearing from you all a little bit. If folks could just take a minute and put in the chat your name, your organization, and then maybe one thing you learned in your post-secondary enrollment journey. So again, if you could please just use the chat, we'd love to hear sort of who's in the room with us today and a little bit more about your own post-secondary enrollment journey and what you learned through that process. I'm happy to share. For myself, the thing I learned the most was like, don't make assumptions. I didn't go to college right after high school because I thought that the $4,000 that SF State had given me was crazy. And I thought my family was like, we're not taking out $5,000 a year in loans. So I actually went to community college and spent 6 years or so trying to get that 2-year degree. And I didn't really know that like $4,500 in loans might actually be like worth it, and I had no way of understanding that because it seemed like such a high amount of money. So to me, I think I learned don't make assumptions about what you're hearing and about what's out there for you as a young person, because I didn't actually finish my bachelor's till I was 28. And that just meant a lot of years working jobs that didn't pay, that didn't set me up, and that didn't give me that upward economic mobility. So, and it also left me really deflated and defeated, right, as a low-income student navigating that process. So yeah, I'd love to just hear from you all. What did you learn in your post-secondary enrollment journey? And then maybe John, I don't know if you'd like to share yours while we wait for folks to put theirs in the chat.
Yeah, I was just about to type it as well, but just even reflecting back for me, I know I didn't know a lot of the stuff that I should have been prepared for because I was basically being an athlete. So my focus was like, I want to continue soccer and I want to make sure I get there. And I found a school and they accepted me, and then I kind of locked in, but not really recognizing even the fact that financial offers are very different at each different school. Because my assumption was, as an immigrant coming here, whatever school I get accepted to, money's going to be the same. I just need to choose a school I need to go to. But now reflecting back, if I'd known that and went through that thoughtful process, my decision may have been most likely a different option.
Yep, for sure. I feel like all of us at work at Moneythink are always like, oh, if I'd had decided, I would have probably made a different decision. But I see some folks coming in. So Sierra, thank you from College Track. Campus resources are a huge factor, absolutely. Jennifer, and I see some people kind of upvoting that. It's not linear. There's so many resources out there. We just have to look for them and advocate for ourselves. So that's such a good point, right? Like there's no one way to do a post-secondary degree or certificate or path, right? Like there's so many different ways to do it. And I think a lot of times it can be really easy as a young person to sort of pigeonhole yourself based on some of maybe the assumptions and the myths that you've heard. And Parshan, I thank you so much. Joining from U Aspire right after graduating high school. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of us in the college access world kind of can relate to that, right? That personal experience is really what fueled your investment in this kind of post-secondary transition and access space. So thank you for sharing. Financial aid was the most important factor. I mean, Jimmy, that's such a good point. And it's so much of what we do here is really students spend a lot of time exploring colleges, saving majors, looking at them, and then they get those letters in the mail and it determines so much. So thank you so much. And Eduardo, thank you for chiming in. I really appreciate everyone sort of letting us know where you're coming from and what your experience was a little bit. So thank you for sharing. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the college journey. So again, I know I'm very much preaching to the choir here with this slide, But one of the things that we really want to highlight here is that, you know, after those college and financial aid applications have gone in, I think Jimmy mentioned it, right, that those acceptances and award letters start to arrive. And what we really want to, you know, recommend is that families and students take the time to compare all of their financial aid packages offered from all of the colleges, right, before making those enrollment decisions. So I think it can be really tempting as an adult supporting young people to sort of look at one and make decisions, but really waiting for all those letters to come in and to compare them side by side so that you can really have a comprehensive view. And then once students and families have chosen that college that they plan to enroll in, you know, you're essentially going to need to accept or decline that financial aid that's been offered to you, right? So then you have to focus on sort of which college includes, you know, collecting your supplies, completing that orientation, and then registering for classes. So what we really focus on here in this presentation is that second step, right? When your acceptances have just arrived and you have to put them side by side and make decisions. This step is incredibly complicated, I'm sure, as you all know very well. And it can be really challenging, not just to students and families, but also to the educators supporting students. So we're going to dig into that second one a little bit. And actually, John, if you could just go to the next slide, we're going to look at an example here. You know, the college affordability problem is really, as you all know very well, incredibly layered in this country. So enrolling in a college with sustainable financial planning is critical. We know that, but there's huge disparities in some of this. And you can go to the next slide, John. You know, here at Moneythink, we really believe that a lot of this is due to some of this cost information being very difficult to obtain, hard to compare, and really challenging to interpret. So for us, financial aid letters have been found, you know, we've been doing direct work with students for over 15 years in schools and districts. And financial aid letters were a huge barrier to young people, right? Because these award letters are so different, and one college can have 4 different templates for their award letters that they're sending out. So decided our tool today that we're going to talk about was really built to solve this problem. And a big part of the issue is that these award letters use hundreds of unique phrases to describe, for example, loans. About 30%, less than 30% of these letters are differentiating between aid and loans, which makes it really difficult for families to know what they're actually going to have to pay. And for advisors, the amount of information required to support students can be really overwhelming, especially because some of this cost and scholarship information is not always available. So there's often a lot of resources and a lot of information out there, but it can be really hard to differentiate what's up to date and what's most trustworthy. So I wanted to talk a little bit now about, you know, a confusing letter, right? So I wonder if folks could just look at this very briefly. And if people could just, I don't know if you can see here, but you know, if you're able to zoom in and sort of see these numbers, I'd love to just hear in the chat. And we're a small enough group, so you know, we can actually, if you raise your hand, we can actually probably unmute you. But use the chat and just let us know sort of what the amount that this student will have to pay based on this award letter. So anybody feel brave enough to take a guess, and it's okay. There's no wrong answers here. Anybody feel brave enough? It's okay if you don't. I might have one of my Moneythink colleagues. Any guesses on how much the student is going to have to pay to attend this school? And thank you, Prashan. So Prashan put in the chat, $6,679. It's a very good guess. Very good guess. What's interesting, and we'll kind of unpack it together, is that, you know, as you can see from this letter, the direct costs, which are those costs that are paid directly to the college, like tuition and fees, right? Yeah, thank you, Parshan. So 12,000, I see Sierra, 12,179 without loans. So also very good guess. I can see that folks are doing some really good digging into this letter. Anyone else? I'm just going to pause before I kind of take the cloche off. Those are very good yeses. Okay. So essentially, as you can see from this letter, those direct costs are going to be 40,904. Some of the indirect costs, like room and board, you can kind of see those listed up above, are going to be about 23,000. So at the top of the letter, what you can see is that the costs are never actually totaled for students. You can also see that the total aid awarded which is essentially that number at the bottom, that $64,537. It includes about $36,000 in loans. So that word aid, right, in this instance is incredibly misleading for a student and their family. The other thing that's really important to note is up at the top, you can see that the estimated amount due at the bottom there doesn't actually pull through those housing and other costs that they've calculated at the top. So that estimated amount due isn't accounting for housing or other things that we know every student is going to have some costs related to transportation and housing and personal expenses. So essentially what this means is that 28,725 of that 64,000 is actually covered with grants and scholarships. This leaves a gap for this student of about $35,812. So this gap is what's really critical to help this student make this enrollment decision, right? But picking apart this letter is incredibly complicated, as we've all seen. And so this is really what we wanted to address with some of the work that we've been doing at Moneythink. And we think this is really unacceptable for students and families who are making one of the biggest financial decisions that they'll ever make. So thank you to Parshan and to Sierra for chiming in. I'm super grateful for your interaction. So, essentially here at Moneythink, we are talking a little bit about college affordability and what that means. So we define this college affordability by the gap, which is what we saw there, that 35,000, or what's left after all your scholarships and grants have been applied towards tuition and fees, housing and meals. So that's all the direct and the indirect costs. So this means that our algorithms are taking into consideration the expense of housing and meals, whether you live on campus, at home, or off campus, to give students and families a really realistic look at how those costs are going to impact affordability. So to be flagged as affordable, a student will be able to cover any remaining costs related to tuition and fees, housing, and meals after all that free money in the grants and scholarships have been applied. So if that remaining gap is less than 7,500, so 7,500, students and families can plan to cover this gap by our research in that $5,500 federal loan, right, which is the maximum subsidized loan that students can get, and or working less than 10 hours a week during the school year. So that's really important because we believe firmly that students shouldn't be working more than 10 hours a week, because once they start to do that, their school really suffers, their academics can suffer. And certainly for students who are working too much, their fit and connectivity and sort of social network that they're building in the campus environment really can suffer. So we consider a gap between about 7,500 and 11,500 to be somewhat affordable. So we'll talk about how this looks in our tool in just a minute. And then essentially anything over that 11,500 is going to be unaffordable. So we're going to talk about what this looks like. But, as we all know very well, taking large amounts of loans is really risky due to having these high monthly payments, which raises the risk of default in the future. And working more than those hours a week can really be detrimental to student success in the classroom. So this is what we're going to talk a little bit about now. And we're going to dive into Decided, and John's going to walk us through. So although we can really define some of these thresholds, right? We've done that with our methodology here at Moneythink. There's no easy way for students and families to differentiate between affordable quality colleges versus the expensive schools with some poor outcomes. So to take a holistic approach in identifying these high quality, affordable college, each student will need to make sure that they compare those financial aid award letters, and they, really compare them against other fit factors, right? Like earning potential, diversity, programs offered, because we believe that students, yes, they have to make decisions based on their finances, but they should also be able to juxtapose that next to other fit factors, which are going to make persisting and completing that degree possible for them. So I'm actually going to hand it off to John now, who's going to dig a little bit into the tools. And please keep questions coming. But I just wanted to pause. Any questions so far, Mayor, that we want to tackle?
Not yet.
Okay, great. Well, John, I'll hand it off to you to keep going.
All right, thank you. I just want to highlight before we dive deeper into this as well, as Hannah was breaking down the thresholds and the methodology, we're putting the core user that we're trying to support as Pell eligible first gen low income students. So those are the thresholds that we're coming from, if you're wondering about that. So it's what is that student has access to directly without overextending them, right? So when we're talking about Parent Plus loans, we're not advising that. But on top of that, you have to apply for it based on credit. So it's not guaranteed. Whereas what we're talking about, the federal sub and unsubsidized loan, the students has direct access to that. And even with that, we're trying to have guidance on what is a good amount and not to overextend. All right, so now we're just gonna go a little overview of decided the tool for the student and for the advisor. We won't be doing a live demo for it today, but at the end, feel free to reach out to me directly so I can show you the tool itself, or we can talk about more implementation as needed. But I do want to highlight what the tool itself looks like. So when it comes to the tool, it's a free web app tool. You don't need to download it within the App Store. And students can create it by just using their email and their name. And we don't really ask any more additional information for them to explore the tool. If they provide us more additional information around their zip code, or when it comes to, hold on, let me play it back. Or when it comes to diversity, that gives them more refined information that's going to be relevant to them. So as you can see, when a student first logs in, they can start searching based on some factors that they're wanting to consider. Maybe location is important to them. The major they want to look at is maybe a priority for them. Or maybe some of our students want to go to HBCU school, right? So we know there's thousands and thousands of schools within the US. How do they narrow that down? It's asking them to refine what value that they're looking for at those schools, right? And the biggest one first that they can go to is the location that's important to them. Do they want to stay close to home? Do they want to go further out? Or for some of our students, it'll be the major. And within that, as they're adding those schools, they'll be able to compare them across those fit factors as well, even before they get the award letters. So this will be really useful to our juniors who are considering that process right now, or even sophomores that you're working with, not only just their senior year for students who are in that final phase of uploading their award letter. And within their My Path page, they also have card links trying to guide them and nudge them to their next steps. So if they're in the exploration phase, it's nudging them towards getting their acceptances, updating that status, as well as then uploading their award letters to be in a position to really make thoughtful decision on their selection and enrollment. And now the same thing we have will be advisor deck as well. So with the advisor deck, the purpose behind it is to provide more of that holistic enrollment decision support, but really having affordability at the top and center of that as well. So this will allow you to review students' progress, look at the colleges they've added, the award letters they've uploaded. You're also able to download those if you want to look at the loans that they're being offered as well, and the financial aid results. You'll be able to manage student list and organize it as you see fit, whether it's by site that you want to use, or maybe you want to do it by a filter process. I want to see all of my students that will end up already having an upload award letter, or in the transition of just looking and exploring at colleges. Again, the tool itself is free for students as well as advisors and partners to go ahead and use it in their programming. And as an organization, what we are trying to do, because we know that there's system within our system right now, an ecosystem tool fatigue, right? So we want to make sure we're actually building this to help reduce some of that administrative tasks that you all are having to do, because we recognize the important time that we can give you is the time with your student to have these important conversations. So the less you have to chasing paperwork, compiling reports, and the more you can spend time having these deep, thoughtful conversations with your students, the more impact that you're able to have as well, with a caseload of potentially 400 students if you're working in high school districts. All right, so at the heart of this, again, both from the student side and the advisor and program side, what we aim to do objectively is to try and make sure that everyone who's involved in that stakeholder is able to easily see what's going to be affordable and what's not, and then compare that across those fit factors. As working a financial coach with students, what I really enjoyed about having decided the progression was made is really being able to put a student in a position to have a mental shift, right? Because I know as a student going through that process, I was just thinking, I hope I get into college. I hope this college values me. It looks a little different when you're getting all these offers, and you can be in a position to think about, how is that institution valuing me? And I can really look at that based on how much money they're willing to give me, because they want me on that campus. They see my value as a person, what I can contribute in that space, right? And I think that shift can happen with these conversations and them seeing all the options that are in front of them. Some of the things that we've been hearing from our students as well as partners from this, again, we go through the human-centered design, so we're continuously talking and iterating the product with student feedback and advisor feedback. So a lot of this was just moving from spreadsheet to colors and circles. So this was pretty big for students, and from our partners, we know we've had some partners who've told us hey, John, I've actually broken this down with a student with a spreadsheet. I showed them all the numbers and discussed it, but it just didn't get through to them, or they just were not interested in having that conversation. But for some reason, I had them go upload an award letter and decide it, and they just saw the red ring, they saw the green ring, and right away that was clicking to them. And that's essentially what we want to do, is we want to make sure we are providing the information to our students that the best way that possible that they can actually take in that information and make decisive decisions. And then from our parents also, being able to see how much is left for them to cover, and then the amount of loans they may not have to take out with the options that their students have can be a stress releaser. So with one of those quotes saying, wait, we only have $3,000 left to pay without loans, we can for sure do that. And that's an exciting part to have, where, you know, our parents are stressed out, especially because they're wanting to support their students fully when they've done the hard work. I want to go ahead and pause right here as well, just see if there's any questions within the chat. It has come up within the group as well.
There has been one, John,
Yeah.
for decided which colleges are on the website. Are there any limitations or colleges that are not included, such as international or community colleges?
Yes, great question. So currently we have all accredited universities within the US, 4-year and 2-year. So if it's like a boot camp or other types of programming, those aren't on the platform, but any 4-year, 2-year accredited colleges will be on the platform.
Great, and that's the only one so far, unless folks want to post another question to the Padlet. Otherwise, I think you can keep going, John.
Yeah, sounds good. And then even though I just wanted to highlight, even with that question, although we were highlighting and showing the 4-year colleges that are on the platform, we do have that 2-year option. So it'd be the same process for students who are considering that. It also depends on the program you're serving, because usually you want to make sure your students are looking through fully their 4-year options first, knowing that the 2-year timeline is a little more extended out. But yes, 2 years will be on there as well. Okay, I will pass it back to Hannah, because we're going to get into some student scenario activity just to talk through some of the scenarios that we've seen within our work ourselves, and then some guidance from Uprooted as well based on those scenarios.
Cool, thanks, John. So, I think it's really important that we try to wrap our heads around this with a few student scenarios. So I'm going to present 2 different students. I'm going to share a little bit of context behind their college going story. And then actually, I'd love for you to use the chat to interact a little bit. We're a pretty small group, so I think that this will work today. But I would love to just continue. We have a lot of folks in this room who understand this work very, very well, and you have a lot of experiences with young people on these topics. So let's learn from each other and take a little bit of time to discuss and talk about this. So I'm going to move to the first student. You can see here, student scenario number 1. This Pell eligible first-gen student has aspirations on becoming a teacher, and finding an affordable college is a big priority for the student. So they want to find a supportive community that can provide a richer educational experience, which means finding a campus with students who share similar experiences. This student self-identifies as Hispanic. So essentially, we're going to use the chat. I'm going to actually, John's going to play this now, and you can kind of look through and see what this student got as their sort of apples to apples comparison around their letters. John is also going to, this video will also kind of walk through some of the other fit factors. So I'm going to stop talking and just let you watch this for a minute. So what you can see here is that we're scrolling through a compare view. This is a student's side-by-side view. They've uploaded 4 or 5 letters. And essentially what this student is looking at is all of their financial aid offers that they've been given. They can favorite that on the far left. So what you can see is that this student has favorited Sonoma State University, for example. And then what the student can do is actually order those by order of preference. So the student can actually move those around and put them in 1, 2, 3, 4. So knowing what you know about this student, so some of the context that I just shared, what kind of talking points would you explore with this student as you advise them? And John's just going to play this again, but please use the chat to just let us know what kind of questions would you have for this young person as you help them decide the best enrollment decision for them. And I'm going to give everybody just a couple of maybe 20 seconds of silence so that you can think and post into the chat. So John has one. Are there any specific fit factors that stand out as conversation starters? So Meredith, I can see, what kind of environment were they looking for? So that's a really good question. So are they looking for something large, something urban, a smaller campus? What is the diversity that they're looking for at the campus? So absolutely, looking at those different factors, and Decided will actually help you look at each of those. So you can select schools and really search them based on some of those demographic factors, and then also some of those proximity and geography factors as well. So thank you, Mayor, for sharing that. And Jennifer, I see, I would consider their immediate needs in terms of resources on campus, a sense of belonging and housing. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really about, I think we talked a little bit about resources before. So getting a sense of what are those resources on campus? What's the housing like? And is that doable for the student? And then those questions of belonging, which again, like finances aside, that's such an important piece for young students. So thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. Parshan, I see what specific degree programs they're going to and what is the expected average income in fields of those majors. So absolutely, what specific degree programs are they interested in? And then sort of what will they come out with if they go into those fields? So I don't know, John, if you can actually see it here, but it might be useful to just jump into Decided and show some of these fit factors, because I'm realizing that a lot of these Decided does cover really well. And this video makes it a little bit tricky. I wonder if it's worth jumping in just to show some of these specific details that folks are talking through. Because we definitely talk about some of those diversity factors that students can actually search by large or rural or urban, campus size, campus location. They can actually see the distance from home within Decided. And then absolutely, there's some national earnings data, Parshan, to your question, just about making sure that they're actually leaving their program with some sort of a degree that actually has labor market value, right, in the area that they live. So what is the average income that they'll come out with? So making sure that they're actually getting degrees that will help them get sustaining wages. Absolutely. And it's okay if not, John, but I'm realizing that a lot of these would be cool to point out in Decided in real time. But anybody else want to add in the chat? Any other questions that you might have? Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, as John's showing here in the Decided tool, you can see a lot of these fit factors. So John, I don't know which ones you want to highlight. I'll let you kind of talk through these because I know that this is your wheelhouse here.
Yeah, I'm going to be highlighting this in the next step when we come back to it, but I just wanted to make sure, just getting everyone in the audience thinking about why these data points could be useful, right? To me, I would even just before I talk about how we used it or how I used it myself, is if this student is looking to be a teacher, is there a difference between a UC and CSU? Like that's a good consideration to have, right? Because they each offer something different. If this student is thinking of belonging, do they have some assumptions that are correct or incorrect? Because sometimes our students assume that if I go to a UC, there's not going to be anyone like me. Is that always the truth? How do we dispel, these assumptions that are not correct, but also how do we validate some of the things that they are right about? So just wanted to point that out, and I saw that happen somewhat within the chat as well. So that's really the whole point, is to provide those data points as that starter for deeper conversation, right? The data itself isn't the key to giving you all the answers, but it is your starting point for that discussion to help the student understand, what am I truly looking for? Am I really looking to go to that big name school? Or maybe I found a school that I didn't think about at all, but it actually matches everything I need to be successful.
Yep. Super good points. And we had a question, John, from Jennifer. Does Decided consider resources? Thanks, Mayor, for putting in the Padlet in their on campus in their selection. So there's their resources listed like EOP, undocumented student services, LA College Promise, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So for that right now, it's not within the tool because we would love to have it as a database. There's just not a national database that's fully up to date. But that is something our team is looking at. So we want to integrate that because that is one of the supportive services that we want to tie into that sense of belonging. So we would love to have that, but if any of you ever find a database that we feel like is up to date and encompasses a lot of the schools, we would for sure be looking into that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, I used to work at CCGI and we ran California colleges, and it's really hard to find that and to have it be up to date, because we did take that from greenhouse orchard, I'm forgetting the name, but there was a database that would allow us to pull it. And it was most of the time pretty incomplete. And we'd meet with colleges and they'd say, we actually offer veteran services and it's not there. So it's really hard to find that data in a national way, but it's a really good point, Jennifer. And it can definitely be the difference. Wintergreen Orchard House. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And we would use that data all the time. And it was really great for starting point, but we'd meet with many colleges who would regularly say that's incomplete or this is missing. And it's tricky, but it's a really good point and I appreciate you raising. Okay, so keep the questions coming in that Padlet. Mayor's there and we're going to kind of bring them up, but I'm going to move on to the next student. So if we could go to the student scenario 2, John. Thank you so much. So this student's top choice, as you can see here on the left, they favored it, is St. Mary's College, which is in California. They're concerned about going too far from home and they're living in the Bay Area. So they've already selected their major and they've not thought too much about affordability or factored that into their decision-making process. So I'm going to have John play this and kind of walk through what the student has been given. But as you can see here, the student has been given a package with a red college, which is their favorite that they've saved at the top there. They've also got a couple of green choices, right, which are those affordable college. And then they've got one in orange, which is a somewhat affordable college. So again, I'm just going to ask for a slight bit of interaction in our chat. What kind of questions would you have for this student, knowing that they favorited a college that was listed as not affordable when they have some other choices? And in fact, you can see that UC Riverside is almost giving them a full ride. So what kind of questions would you have for this student? So yeah, thank you, Sierra. What about St. Mary's makes this your dream school? Do other choices have similar offerings? So that's such an important one, right? Like really unpacking what is it about this school that shines for the student? And then how can you broaden the net a little bit to maybe help them think about maybe there are other schools that meet that need that perhaps are more affordable for you, or that would mean that you're not taking out an exorbitant amount of loans. So that is such a good point, and it's such a good broad, like open-ended question, so that you're not really crushing. Like, I think a lot of us as counselors have all felt like dream crushers and like advisors, right? You felt like you have to have these conversations with students. But one of the most powerful things we've decided that I've seen is that like this data can open up that discussion in a really objective way for a student, because you're not the one saying this isn't affordable for you. It's the data, the algorithm's running it. We can see that this is going to require, in this case, about $47,000 in loans a year, right, to go to that dream school. So Sierra, I love how broad your question is. I love how it's going to allow the student to really reflect. And then I love the second question, which is to nudge them a little bit to think about other options and see if those meet their needs. So thank you for that. Any other questions that folks would have for this young person? Okay, well, cool. I'm going to hand it off now to Tiffany, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the long-term impacts of some of these poor financial fits. So Tiffany, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I wanted to hop in. I think both Hannah and John and myself, all of us have, tech resources for students. I think part of the conversation about the fit and to mention like Jennifer's question around resources about identity and those sorts of things, those are the pieces that we hope when we provide these tools of tech can alleviate some of the information time that it takes when working with students, so you can have these more robust, individualized conversations. So if you joined late, I'm Tiffany Green. I'm the founder of Uprooted Academy. We are an ed tech platform that really guides students through their college application. So we know that there's lots of resources to get them to the application, right? They have their list, but getting them through it is really where the main concern comes. So it's an on-demand content that's web and phone app enabled. And so, Jennifer, one of the things that we do discuss in our program, just to kind of answer that question, is this school going to be ready to serve my identity? And as someone who is, someone who had to have affinity groups on campus in order to thrive, is something that we didn't want to take out. And so combined, right, you can have them watch that video, think about their identity, whether it's like mental health resources or identity based off of their sexuality or their gender, and just really ensuring that when we send students to these campuses, that these campuses are ready for them. I am a licensed therapist, and that was my first role. For 5 years, I worked at a university in their counseling center and served on retention committees. And, you'd be so surprised. Many of our students are leaving with more mental health concerns because of just who they show up to be and the campus not being ready for them. So I think we do a really good job of like sharing that content with them. And then we hope that the conversations are more robust. And so thinking about those conversations and thinking about the long-term impacts of, you know, just not having a good fit in general, but particularly a financial fit while working at the university, this is some of the things that we often would see. So meet Nicole. Nicole is a student, first gen, gets accepted to college. And we know this story so well, right? Their family wants to do whatever it takes in order for Nicole to be able to go, right? And so if there is a bill that is $10, $15, $20,000, they're going to try to make it work, right? And so we just saw in that, you know, the example of the bill that oftentimes universities require families to take out a loan. We know that's not always something that's possible for our students, especially if they're low income and their family might not have strong credit or even a consistent income. But what happens if they make just enough, right? So they do the, you know, the dinners to raise money, or they do a GoFundMe and their entire community comes to like provide this. Oftentimes the question is, could this family do this for 2 years if they're going to a 2-year school, or could they sustain this like fundraising effort for 4 years? And we're not even talking about inflation and the fact that tuition goes up. And so let me tell you what happens to Nicole long term. So oftentimes, if Nicole is going to raise money for the rest of her gap between what the school gave her and the actual bill, oftentimes they're just looking at the direct cost, right? Which is why this tool of Decided is so incredible, because it considers the indirect cost. And why are indirect costs so important? Because it includes things like textbooks. There's so many studies and so much research that shows that students who have their own textbooks are more likely to not be in academic jeopardy, academic probation or pre-probation. And so oftentimes you'll find these students show up and they don't have the extra $1,000 because they literally have stretched themselves so thin. And so now they're not prepared to succeed as a student, right? And so thinking about that, that means that this student, their family chose this fit. It wasn't the right fit for their particular situation, but now this student might go there financially, but academically might be at risk. The second thing that often happens with a student like Nicole who does this is if they cannot sustain this year after year or even term after term, because oftentimes, especially if she's low income and first gen, oftentimes income might fluctuate. And so they might be able to do the fall tuition bill, but let's say spring comes and someone who promised Nicole, oh, I'm going to give you, you know, $500 cannot do it, mainly because their own life situation is fluctuating. And so now Nicole cannot pay her bill. For the most part, during the spring term, Nicole might be okay, right? Nicole might actually be able to stay in her classes. She might be able to stay on campus, but she now has a hold on her account. And so what does that hold mean? It means that when her peers are starting to register for classes for the fall, she can't register. When they're starting to pick housing on campus for the fall, she can't choose housing. And so oftentimes Nicole's just gonna like, you know, muster through, hopefully her grades are okay. And she's gonna finish not recognizing that not only does she have a hold on her account, she has not enrolled in school, right, for the next term. She can't live on campus. And so now she's not able to return to that institution. So most students like Nicole will think, you know what, I'll go to an affordable school, maybe a 2-year school back at home. Unfortunately, because Nicole has a hold on her account at that other institution, she cannot request a transcript. And so legally, Nicole can't apply at this other institution as a first-time full-time student, right? She has to apply as a transfer student, which means now she needs a transcript, and Nicole cannot do that. And so now Nicole is working at a job that probably doesn't pay the tuition, right? And so now she's in this rat race of trying to get out to get back to the school that she owes money to. And what do we know about 6 months after IPEDS recognizes that Nicole is not a full-time student, her loan repayment triggers. And so if she's probably at a school that she couldn't afford, it probably also included loans for her and probably both federal and maybe even private loans. And so now Nicole has found herself someone who is bright, well able to finish his university degree. She can't do it. And so these are the long-term impacts of a poor financial fit. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can prevent that, when conversations should start. I oftentimes in the program that we run on our app, I say early and often, right? Students should be thinking about this as early as freshman year, and families should as well, right? Having a clear understanding of what the family can do with empathy and compassion, recognizing this is probably the first time a family can't give you what you need. If we are able to facilitate those conversations early and often, when it's time for Nicole to apply to schools and finalize her list, summer of senior year, everyone is on the same playing field, right? And so this tool of Decided can help them do that. And so I'm going to pass it back over to them to really showcase more scenarios of how we can prevent Nicole from being in a situation where she's really bright and well-abled, but just not able to get a university degree because of a poor financial fit.
Thanks for that, Tiffany. And I think that just rounds it out really well as well. I'm mindful of our time as well, so I'm going to try and hit some of these points. So I wanted to give you just a reflection of that first student scenario. Original trajectory is the student that we got to work with through our program. Trajectory was going to attend San Jose, but actually ended up enrolling in the end at Sonoma State. And a lot of that was due to affordability. They wanted to have a teaching program that offered a clear path toward their chosen career. And they, after thoughtful conversation, recognized that UC wasn't the best route for that. As they uploaded the award letters, when they were accepted, they had many affordable options to choose from, CSUs and UCs as well. They were considering that diversity, campus, environment, graduation rate. And one of the things that caught their attention was the graduation rate for their ethnicity, which is what Decided shows as well. So they were kind of a bit shocked when they looked at San Jose and saw that 4-year rate was 19%. Now, this does not mean students are not successful or not doing things right if they don't finish within that 4-year, but the conversation was more about, can this impact you financially down the road if you're depending on those 4 years of the financial that you're getting? And if you extend to a 5th, are you going to be able to afford that? So that really made things a lot more clear for them. They considered UC Santa Cruz as an option because it was a really affordable option, but they recognized it wasn't going to fit their program in that moment of what they needed. So they opted out for the Sonoma, even though it cost a little more. And this goes into a lot of what we just discussed, right? So it was thoughtful planning, comparing, and really figuring out what is the best fit for me and what is the environment. They also recognized there was a program specific for Latinas to help them into teaching credential. So that solidified their choice much more down. So in the beginning, they went affordability was number priority. Towards the end, they were like affordability with the right fit for me and what I need to be successful was the outcome of that process. But again, a lot of these different touch points that we just talked about help illuminate that for the students so they can get to that decision on their own. Prior to that, they were adamant that they were going to go to San Jose because they expected that was going to be the one fit. Plus, they knew a lot of their friends were going to go there. That's a reoccurring scenario that I know advisors are going to hear. My friends are going there. I'm looking at that school. But towards the end, the student was like, my friends may be going there, but I'm not going there. If it's a red school, it's not happening. If it's yellow, it's not happening. And they start recognizing that everyone gets different award letters and different offers because the assumption was if I got in and it's a good offer, my friend will get the same thing. And that's not the reality.
Hey, John, we had a couple questions in the chat that I was wondering if we could just get to. So one of them is, can students tell on the app if a college has on-campus housing? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so we take the data from iPads as well to draw that. So when they select the on-campus housing, our numbers will fluctuate that are assigned towards that. If it doesn't have it, then it'll probably just have them select the numbers that will showcase off-campus housing that they need to account for.
Great, thank you. And these are great questions. So Jennifer, I also had a question. Does Decided include healthcare options provided at each school? Also, whether they're on or off campus and what they cover, such as psychological services and counseling, et cetera.
Yeah, so the detailed information of each college and their health plans, no, we would not cover that. So what we do cover is more of our guides, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So the whole purpose of it is once a student has an account, our guides become much more personalized information for them because we talk about your consideration, especially if your family has health insurance. You actually sometimes need to take waiver forms and complete them to reduce your cost of attendance. That could be $2,000 saving, which is huge for our families, right? Because if you don't know that, you're hit with that $2,000 cost. Same with housing. We're talking about the quad versus a single. Not all students know that there's different pricing point, and that's how you save money. And that is much more within our guides. It'll be a general one that goes through that, but then they can then relate it to their personalized list of schools if they have an account on Decided. The guides itself are accessible with an account or without an account. And we make sure we use the same language, both for our advisors and our students. So then you're on the same platform discussing those topics as well.
Thanks, John. These are great questions. Thanks everybody for chiming in. I'm attentive to the time. We have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to hand it back to John and Tiffany, and we'll close us out.
Yep. Okay. And I'll go through this second student. Again, the trajectory was to attend St. Mary's. That was been their dream school since they were a little kid. They went to that campus. They loved the campus, and they were sold on that. And actually, they got an acceptance at SF State early on in the season. But because they got the acceptance at St. Mary's, they actually rejected SF State and said, "Hey, I actually don't want to take someone's spot that's on the waiting list." Right? Being thoughtful, but also they limited their options because when they upload the award letter. And then I asked them out of curiosity, let's upload a UC option. Let's upload the other colleges you have. That's where the shock factor came into them, because when their family saw the loans that they had to take out, they told me my parents weren't tripping about it. They thought it was a normal process. But then when they got to compare what that gap really looked like from the options, they themselves said, yeah, I'm not going to make my parents take these loans out. That's too ridiculous. Even though it's my dream school, I'm going to have to pivot. I wish I didn't say no to SF State early in the phase. They looked at UC. They were excited that that could be affordable, but they recognized they couldn't go that far from home. They want to stay closer. Also, the UC didn't have their teaching program they wanted. They didn't want to go to Sonoma because they didn't feel the campus vibe. So in the end, they actually decided to opt out to a 2-year route, but we planned out their transition, right? So they got the tag program, made sure they got all their classes in, transferred within 2 years, went to SF State, so made their way back to their the first choice that they declined. But again, a lot of conversation went through that, but it was a spark of them seeing what their options were. Before then, they were just locked in on one option and they were going to be headed towards that. We don't have much time, so I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany to potentially give us our last slide.
Yeah, I think we'll just be really quick with this particular one. I think the key here is to ensure that when we have high achieving students who might be able to go to a school with a higher sticker price, to walk them through that emotional kind of like fright of what that sticker price might mean, and really giving them the resources like we talked about. Decided can help them recognize that they have high levels of financial aid for their given situation. And then again, we offer components of our app to help them navigate each step. So the interview, making sure their essays are competitive, their supplemental essays are in there. And so just thinking long-term financial impacts of undermatching, right? These are students that should go to school and have very little debt when they come out, especially if they hit factors like being low income. And so just making sure that we as counselors are doing a little bit more pushing to get them aware of those particular institutions. And like I said before, we do around 70 virtual visits of schools, particularly that are between 90 and 100% need met, to really expose our students. And so just this slide is just to navigate that. Like if Nicole undermatches and she's well able to go to a school that has 100% need met, she'll probably have more debt than she probably needs to. So let's just make sure our students are in the right place if they're able.
Since we're at time, I want to make sure, to thank everyone that joined us for the call today for your engagement as well. Happy to stick around for a couple minutes for any question and answers. And I believe there will be a slide deck that will be shared out with you along with a couple of resources and then the Padlet resource that you have there as well. I'm going to skip to slides where it has our information so you can stay in contact with us as we answer any remaining questions.
Yeah. And I wanted to also reminder, there's an exit ticket in the chat. Please fill that out. It's super helpful to us to know what sticks and what works and what doesn't. So we love your feedback, and huge thank you to Tiffany Green, who's joined us today. We're super grateful for this partnership with you and to do this amazing work alongside this group of people. So thank you all for your thoughtful questions, for jumping in the chat. I know it's a big ask to do that, but I hope that the next couple of months goes well while you and your students enroll in the right college for them. And take good care. Please reach out if you have any questions at all.
We want to thank all of our incredible presenters from across 10 partners who shared their gifts of time, talent, and treasure with us over the last 4 weeks, from February 23 through March 16, 2023. Whether you attended one session or more, please complete our exit ticket and let us know how we can enhance these sessions and this series for future years. Thank you to our generous partners for providing our wonderful gifts for our series raffle. You can win one of 5 prizes, like a backpack filled with goodies from our steering committee member, Moneythink, a $100 athletic gift card, or a Gap Inc. swag bag. Don't forget to check out the rest of this YouTube playlist for more great content from our partners. Thank you again to our 10 partners from across the state of California: the University of California, the California State University, the California Community Colleges, the California Student Aid Commission, ScholarShare 529 and CalKids, AICCU, or the Association for Independent California Colleges and Universities, the California Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and Decided, powered by Moneythink. We also want to give special thanks to our connector sponsor, the College Futures Foundation, and to all of our generous sponsors. This free 4-week webinar series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, our members, our sponsors, our partners, and more. We invite you to share this series with your colleagues, students, and families across California. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.